Well, and let's take that a step further, because like you were saying, like let's hypothetical situation here. Let's say you've got, and I'm not even going to bring race into it because it's kind of irrelevant for this, but like let's say you've got a man and a woman, equal academic achievement, pretty much equal upbringing, but they both want to start a business. And, they take the plunge, they do the risk, both of their businesses fail. So the man's only real recourse is to re-enter the job market. Now, depending on how long, and I'm speaking from experience here, depending on how long he was in business for himself, that might have been extremely detrimental to him getting a job, because I worked for a small business for 8 years. And for 2 of those 8 years, I was trying to get a job. But the problem with working for a small business or having your own business is on your resume, it doesn't count. It doesn't count, especially if you have your own business. If you worked for yourself on a resume, it doesn't count, because employers, and I don't think they intentionally do this, but they're skeptical of people that have an entrepreneurial spirit, because they know they're probably less likely going to fall in line. They're going to, or at least they're afraid they're going to go against the grain. And in all likelihood, they would. That's why they were entrepreneurs. They got tired of working for somebody else. It's why I started my own business, because I didn't like having a boss. On the flip side, you have the woman in question. And this is actually, no, it probably doesn't even matter how old she is. If things absolutely go to shit for her, like let's say she can't attract a male benefactor, let's say, or she can't fall back on like her parents or her father to help take care of her. I mean, as long as she's reasonably attractive, at the end of the day, she could always start an OnlyFans.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, right there. But, the man built his business and failed, and so shame on him. But the system was just stacked against the girl. It's not fair, so she should be helped. And I guarantee you, almost every time that situation happens, that's how it falls into place. I'm not saying the girl gets an OnlyFans, but she's usually looked upon like, well, the system cheated her. It's because she's a woman.
Well, that's one of the things that I talk about is whatever this points at is where your power is. And so in your scenario, when that man fails at the business, he doesn't have anyone else to point at. I mean, I suppose he could if he wanted, but it's more likely that he's going to point at himself and he's going to say, I could have done this better. I could have changed this. I could have worked harder, whatever it is.
Well, no,
and so he's going to point at himself.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to take that a step further. And I will agree. Most men probably wouldn't point at themselves. Well, entrepreneurial men probably would, but let's say in this scenario. So even if he did point the finger at somebody else, particularly, and trigger warning, especially if he was a heterosexual white man, if he did point the finger at somebody else, even other men would look at him and be like, nah, bro.
Right.
You just failed.
Well, and that's a kindness that we do to each other too. Because
people don't get that.
Yeah, if we're friends and you try to pull that bullshit and you're like, oh, it's because of that, I'd be like, oh, no, you went out and got drunk every fucking day and don't give me that shit.
You're the one whose hours of operation were noon to 4 every day.
Right.
Like, don't come at me with that bullshit. You're the one who thought you could become a rapper with no musical talent whatsoever.
Yeah, that's our kind toxic masculinity right there. It seems mean, but it's kind.
Well, but here's the thing, and this is funny, because while I do agree there are some masculine behaviors that could be considered toxic, they would be toxic whether or not they were being perpetrated by a man or a woman. But I think a lot of things become toxic when the audience changes. So for example, in that, if our buddy's business fails and it's because he's incompetent, we tell him, it's like, well, man, like, you're complaining, but you were really quite bad at that. Maybe you should, think about doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
But insert a woman into that. Now we're bullying her.
Right.
Now we're being chauvinistic because, well, once again, the deck is stacked against her. It's like, I mean, maybe it depends on the situation, but on the whole, in 2021, probably not. In fact, she probably had some advantages over her male counterparts in a similar situation.
Yeah, but you can see very easily the disservice that that does to those women is because that's taking their power away from them. So, women talk about wanting to be empowered. Well, empowered is it's my fault. I can change it. It's me. I did it. All of those things pointing back at me, that's empowerment. That's saying all of this was my fault or finding a way to make it my fault. Because when we encourage women, it's the opposite of empowerment. What a lot of people do when they say, "Oh no, honey, it's not your fault. The deck was stacked against you. There's no way you could have survived in a man's world." Well, you could
Until
have
she
worked
does.
harder.
Until she does. Until she does
Yeah.
survive in a man's world, and then it was like, "Oh, look at you. You're a boss bitch. You're a this, that, the other." It's like, well, no, she's just a boss like anybody else would be because she worked her ass off. She was smart. She adapted to the market when it changed. These are all things that have nothing to do with her gender, but just because she's a woman, she gets that extra credit, so to speak. Because the joke I always say is, you know what you call a boss bitch with a penis? A boss.